Hello writer, and welcome back to my life. It's Writer Wednesday, the day I give you my best tips and advice on the art and the business of writing and tell you how I do what I do as an indie author. As usual, we're answering a question from one of my $5 patrons on Patreon, and today's question comes to us from Gin Hollan, who asks, what's the best way to test the viability of story ideas, and is it really the short story? Thanks for the question, Gin. So there's a thing I've heard a lot since I started writing, that a short story is a good way to test out a story concept. This is the proof of concept idea. Like, if you can write a good short story around an idea, then it's worth developing out further into a novel. I remember this also being a prevalent idea when I worked in the film industry, but in both cases, I myself actually haven't found that to be the case. Now granted, I have not worked extensively in the medium of short stories, but that's because I think short stories are almost an entirely different type of creation than a novel or book series, just like short films are different from feature-length films. I tend to think of short stories like an SNL skit. You've got enough time for the premise, the setup, the hook, and the punchline, and that's about it. And often the story you can fit into a short story format doesn't really have a lot more to it than that. Take one of the most famous short stories of all time, The Gift of the Magi by O. Henry. Even if you've never actually read it, you've almost certainly heard of it. A guy sells his pocket watch to buy a Christmas present for his wife, a comb for her beautiful hair. But when he comes home, he found that she's cut almost all her hair and sold it to a wig maker so that she could buy a gold chain for his pocket watch. The pocket watch that he sold to buy the comb for her hair that she cut off. And in the original, the story ends as they realize how important their love is and how far they're willing to go for each other, and it's a beautiful, ironic, heartwarming story. That's a fantastic short story! It just doesn't get better than that. But that's not novel material. I can't see a way to expand that story into a novel-length work. Now, you could definitely turn those characters into the main characters of a novel, and that short story could be part of their backstory, but that wouldn't be the main story of the book. I see this misapplied by authors or screenwriters in both directions. Some will come up with fantastic short stories, but if the short story or short film does well, they try to expand it to a full-length work, and there just isn't enough there. On the other side, some writers will come up with a great novel and then either try to take one part of it and make it fit in the short story format, or condense the whole novel into a short story. And in my opinion, neither of these things work. I can't even think of one prominent example to give you, precisely because I've never seen an example where this actually succeeded. But I have seen a lot of times where the storyteller did it and the project just sort of fizzled and went nowhere. Okay, so in my opinion, the short story isn't a good avenue by which to test the viability of your story. What is? Well, to answer that, I will refer to the always relevant book Save the Cat, which, as you know, is a bit of a storytelling bible of mine. In the very first chapter, Blake Snyder advises you to nail the entire idea of your story, for him a screenplay, for us a novel, into a single simple idea that you can express in a minute or less, a log line plus a tiny bit more explanation to clarify. And he actually recommends that you take that idea out and toss it at complete strangers in coffee shops or whatever, and see if you can grab their attention. He gives 4 ingredients to the perfect summary, and they are: 1, your story must be in some way ironic and emotionally involving. 2, your story must have a compelling mental picture that immediately springs to the listener's mind when they hear it. 3, you gotta know your audience and tone, and the story idea has to be crafted to appeal to them. 4, you've gotta have a killer title, one that says what the story idea is and does so in a clever way. And then he gives several exercises at the end of the chapter to help you develop your ability to come up with this story idea. So what you do is you take your story idea, reduce it down to its barest simplicity, and then run it by people until you get a story idea that invariably attracts the attention of people you pitch it to, even if you're not actually pitching. You don't have to do it with complete strangers. I do it with friends and readers inside my community. But they have to be the right kind of people, right? Like, if you try to pitch shifter erotica to someone who only reads Jack Reacher thrillers, you're just not likely to get a good response. And you might think that your story idea is bad, when the truth is you just need to give it to someone other than your slightly weird survivalist uncle. So does this sound too simple? Does it sound like it's maybe too easy? Well, I'd propose that it might be faster than writing a short story, but it's also much harder. Reducing your story idea down to a single paragraph requires such economy of motion, thought, and wordplay that it's likely to be one of the more difficult parts of writing your story. But it is an incredibly helpful thing to do, not only because it guides the rest of your story creation from that point forwards, but because it's also very useful when your book is done and it comes time to market. If you can turn your story into an elevator pitch that can hook a total stranger at a coffee shop, you'll know you've got a viable idea that can turn into a successful book. And that's all I've got for you today, writer. Thank you so much to Gin for the question. I hope you and others found the answer helpful. A reminder to others that my $5 patrons like Gin get these videos 2 weeks in advance, and they're also the only ones who can ask me questions for future videos. If you want to be one of those awesome and incredibly attractive individuals, you can become a patron at the link in the description. You can also buy the Writer Wednesday t-shirt. It tells people you're a writer so you don't have to. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next Wednesday. Bye!